This is episode 5 of the Wild Minds series. And on today's show, we have Kalman Tinka. I'm just going to have you introduce yourself. So go ahead.
Sure. Well, my name is Kalman. And as you said, my trail name is Ghost Mule, which is what I go by on my channel. And my channel is Everyday Backpacker. I'm bad at camera angles there. Um,
Awesome. I'll put a link to you.
yeah. So it's a YouTube channel I started 4 years ago now. Yeah. And a little bit about me. I'm originally from Ohio, so I'm a Midwesterner flatlander. But a few years ago, 10 years ago now, I moved out to Montana and I never went back to Ohio, obviously, and fell in love with the mountains out here. And yeah, so now I'm Montana based and I just do a channel. And it started out just as a channel for me to share my various activities and stuff with people who I knew who wanted to, I guess, live vicariously through me. It was just supposed to be for me and my friends. And then, of course, with my background of working in the outdoor industry and stuff, I kind of organically branched into talking about gear and stuff because I feel like you can't really do an outdoor channel anymore without talking about gear. Because, I mean, that's what I think our little world tends to revolve around, which I think is fine. You know, I think it's the great equalizer amongst backpackers because we all have to have it and we all have to use it. And so we all talk about it. But yeah, so that's kind of me in a nutshell.
So, what brought you to Montana?
So I am the poster child for how not to have a long-lasting career in life. I started out of high school as a firefighter paramedic, and I did that for 10 years. And it was a great job for during that time, and I grew a lot out of it. But I also grew a lot of unhealthy things, such as post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. So after 10 years, I decided that I wanted to have a better quality of life. And I had seen too many of my coworkers go off on permanent physical and mental disabilities. And so I decided that for my own physical and mental well-being that I wanted to do something different. And I'd always enjoyed the outdoors. I'd gotten into the outdoors as a scout and had spent a lot of time in that. And while I was working for a firefighter, I had a 24-hour on, 48-hour off shift. And so I had a lot of downtime. And I started volunteering at the local park district as an environmental educator and stuff like that. And I kind of fell in love with it and decided that I wanted to try to go to school to see about doing that full time. And so I went back to college at 30 and I got 2 degrees. One is ecotourism and adventure travel, which I still use somewhat today. And the other is natural and historical interpretation. And from there, I actually worked for the state of Ohio's state parks for a couple seasons. And it was a seasonal job. So I would have the summer season on, and then I'd have to figure out something to do in the winter season. And during my winter season, you know, I had an opportunity. A friend of mine had a job as an ed director for a nonprofit out here in Montana. And she asked if I wanted to come out and work for her for a short period of time. And I said, absolutely, because I just needed to get out of Ohio for a variety of reasons at that point for a little while. And so I did. And I got out here, and I'm not supposed to tell anybody this, but the West is pretty awesome, and it kind of causes you to fall in love with it. And that's exactly what happened to me. Even though as a Montanan, I'm supposed to say, don't come here. But it's a wonderful place, and I just fell in love with it. And so I work full time. I sell backpacking gear. So interestingly enough, as much as I talk about gear on here, I don't really enjoy it because I talk about gear all the time.
Right. Yep. Understandable.
But yeah, so I work full time doing that. And when I'm not doing that, I'm in the summertime, I'm backpacking as much as I can. I live near the Beartooth Mountains, and it's one of my absolute favorite places in the world. And then in the wintertime, when it's not absolutely nuking snow or anything like that, or negative 40 degrees out, we're skiing. So
Nice.
it's not a bad life. I'm pretty happy with it, but it's definitely been a really interesting roller coaster ride.
That's pretty cool. So, how long have you been backpacking? You said you've been kind of an outdoorsy. You started in the Scouts, and so did you start backpacking when you were in the Scouts, or had you?
So yeah, backpacking definitely happened when I was a scout, and actually towards the latter part of my time as a scout. My dad loves to car camp, and we did a lot of car camping as a family, but we never really did anything backpacking wise. Although my dad's favorite story of me growing up is the one time we tried to do a backpacking trip and it epically failed. And he loves to tell everybody that I was faking an asthma attack up the hill.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh. I'm assuming
so,
you weren't faking.
well, I may have been exaggerating for
Were
dramatic,
you
as a
dramatic effect? Okay.
13-year-old. But it was tough. I mean, we were way overpacked and we didn't know what we were doing. And he likes to tell that story because it doesn't mention how much he was struggling as well, because it makes him look a little bit better.
Right, right.
But when I was 17, going on 18, my troop got an opportunity to send a group to a place called Philmont. So that was in 1997, and I turned 18 like 2 months before the trip. So technically, I wasn't a scout. I went as an adult leader, which blows my mind because all my
Wow.
friends were still scouts. Um, but yeah, so we went on that, and we did a longer trip. We did 10 days, and I want to say we did, if not 100 miles, very very close to 100 miles in that time. Again, it was a tough trip. We were all kind of new at it and didn't really know what we were doing. But even though I probably had the hardest time, I had a lot of blister issues and things like that. It somehow just got in my heart that this is what I wanted to do. I don't know if it was me being stubborn and saying that I wasn't going to let the trail beat me or what, but it's just something that kind of resonated with me. And so I started doing it and would do it off and on. I did several trips again with the parks that I was volunteering for, but definitely ramped up more when I came out here. And actually, before that, even when I was going through my outdoor leadership program in college, and we had opportunity to do some backpacking trips in the Black Hills, throughout the Hocking Hills area in Ohio, and Dolly Sods, West Virginia, and a couple other places. And I also did a lot of backpacking in Red River Gorge in Kentucky. And then, of course, like I say, I moved out here. And, in Ohio, we had like three places we could go backpacking, and two of them were in other states. And out here, it's mind blowing how many places there are to go and how big this state is for things. My friends are all like, "Oh, have you been to Glacier National Park yet?" And I was like, "I haven't made it up there yet." What do you mean? It's in the state you live in? I was like, "It's still 8 hours away."
It's a big state. That's like Texas. I don't think people realize how big Texas is either.
Yeah, Texas is huge. My parents live in Texas, so.
Oh,
Uh,
that's right. Yeah.
but yeah, so I would say generally off and on since the '90s, but seriously since the um, early 2000s.
And where did you go to college? Did you go back in Ohio?
Yeah, so I was back in Ohio, a little school called Hocking College,
Okay.
which has gone through some changes since I was there. I am a little disappointed in the school now, but at the time it was one of the best outdoor programs out there. I got to do a lot of really cool stuff. I did a study abroad in the Bahamas. I'm studying in Canada, and my very first class was a lab for dendrology, and we literally were out in the forest just looking at trees. So
Yeah, you really can't ask for a better gig.
yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was a neat school. It was a neat program at the time. One of my degrees doesn't exist anymore out there, which is unfortunate. I think it was a really great program, but the new leadership disagreed. My degree wasn't in outdoor leadership, but I did have a couple quarters that I spent learning how to do outdoor leadership. So it was more of an abbreviated program. There's definitely a lot more interest in outdoor leadership stuff, be it outdoor therapy or guiding or even
Right.
all that stuff.
Were you wanting to actually guide?
It's definitely one of those things where, what I initially set out to do, didn't pan out. Originally I wanted to do some outdoor therapy stuff, and I got to do some trip leading for kids in groups. And, interestingly enough, I found that it's a very different thing to go backpacking on your own with your friends in your own situation, and then to actually lead or guide a group.
Yeah.
Um, you know it's a lot more exhausting because you spend a lot more time focusing on the other parts of the group. And
Yeah.
in my case, it was boys from anywhere from 10 to 13 years old, so you're kind of like always on. And so I quickly kind of figured out that in that sense, I didn't think guiding would be a great match for me. And so then I started kind of focusing more on the interpretive side of things. And so interpretation The best way to describe that is if you go to a national park, there's two types of rangers. There's the
Mhm.
law enforcement rangers, and that's pretty self-explanatory. And then there's the other rangers that do the educational programs and the historical programs and things like that. And that's interpretation. That's interpretive rangers. Their job is to, using experiential education, actually teach people about the resource or things like that. So I kind of focused more on that. And obviously, I did that for Ohio State Parks as an environmental educator. And I came out here and worked as an environmental educator. And unfortunately, as much as I enjoyed working for nonprofits, it's not a lot of money involved in it.
Yeah.
So when I had the opportunity to take this job full time, even though it's retail, it's still paid a lot more. It's a means to an ends.
Yeah.
Discount is really nice. So I guess the long and the short is I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Uh,
None
you
of
know,
us do. Do we? Does anyone? Like,
I don't think so. I think, the old idea of, doing the same job for 40 years and the white picket fence and all that stuff, I think has evolved. The American dream is a little different. And
yeah.
I'm definitely one of the people who I've made the choice to enjoy my life while I can. And, that may create some hardships down the road, but right now I'm really enjoying everything and moving forward, and it's working out well for me. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Life is
but
too short.
exactly. Yeah. You're never guaranteed the next day. So you might as well do what you can with what you got.
I agree 100%. As I get older, I find that I'm interested in more things. And, all of my degrees are in music. I was professionally trained to be a classical musician. I'm now working as a full time nature and landscape photographer. Yeah, it's interesting the paths that life takes you on, the twists and the turns and whatnot. But I definitely feel like that that idea of sticking to one thing is really outdated, and I feel like that never should have been pushed on anybody ever.
Yeah.
It's so
The
limited.
idea that we force 18-year-olds are like, okay, you just got out of school. Now decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And that's just
Yeah.
terrifying. Like you said, I'm not a poster child for that because I did not stick with a career, and I still don't have really, one in mind. This one's been coasting pretty well for a while, but who knows? Maybe I will quit my job and go hike the PCT.
Maybe you'll become a YouTube influencer.
Oh goodness, that's almost as more terrifying than anything else. It's like hard enough when I just hit the coveted 1,000 subscriber mark.
Woo, congrats.
Thanks.
I think it's like
It's
simultaneously what we want and don't want.
right, exactly. There's so much else that comes with it. Now it's like, people are like, oh, he must really, really know what he's talking about. And of course, as you know, my alter ego is also my my visual representation of my imposter syndrome, which I have really bad. And all
Yeah. So tell us about that, because I actually think that's a really cool thing you integrate into your channel that I've not seen anybody else do.
so Chad, so the Chad is my alter ego, and I don't have a picture of him. He wears a Big Agnes trucker hat and Oakley sunglasses, and he is basically, pardon the phrase, a douchebag. Um, and he started completely innocently. I needed something to do, so I did a video about trip planning, and I needed a back and forth. And of course, I film in my 1 bedroom basement apartment most of the time, and it's not like I can call up my buddies and like, hey man, you want to come do this stupid thing? And so I was like, well, I need to have it back and forth. And so I wanted to do a thing where I illustrated, where I think everybody's had that experience where they've been planning a trip with somebody for like a couple of weeks. And then like 10 minutes before you go to pick them up, they call and they're like, oh man, I can't go. And so I had the Chad call, and I'm like loading the pack in the bag. I'm like, dude, I'm picking you up in 10 minutes. And so that was his first ever appearance, and it was just a comedic, like way for me to do a bad joke and then blame it on the other guy.
I need to go back and watch that one because I think I didn't see that.
It's a very obscure like trip planning, yeah. So I just kept using him because I had more terrible jokes that I wanted to do that involved a back and forth, and organically he just kind of started turning into this amalgamation of various characters I've come across, both in my professional as well as my personal experience in the outdoors. And there's that guy that always, you know, walks around with a "I know more than you" attitude, and it kind of morphed into this way of me dealing with the fact that no matter how much experience I have or how much I do this for a living or anything like that, I still, in my twisted little world, think I don't know anything. Why are you listening to me? Like, I don't have great advice. And I know that's not true, not to sound too conceited, but I knew that wasn't true, but that was the little voice in the back of my head. And so I thought, well, I could use this character to kind of voice that in a way that is more funny than it is degrading. And so basically he just became this guy who, come up with the backstory about, we jokingly said that I met him while backpacking, and it was really terrible weather, and I had to go shelter in an outhouse, and he was already in there, and he just keeps following me around and basically making fun of me constantly. And so yeah, he just basically calls me out on stuff, and it's really my internal dialogue of going, dude, why are you doing this? Who do you think you are doing this YouTube stuff? You're 44 years old. You're not an influencer. Like, shut up.
He's so relatable.
Yeah, it's. I'm sure that there's some like psychologists out there that would love to have a heyday with how I managed to create this alter ego manifestation of my own,
Yeah,
mental.
and that psychologist's name might be Chad.
Well, and it's funny because I just finished filming a video, and Chad wears this R1 pullover that I have because it's got the collar that pops, and it's got like bright yellow. It was a closeout thing. It would something I never in a million years would have bought, but it's really comfortable, and I use it when I backpack. And but I also always have him wearing it because I can pop the collar and look extra, douchey. But yeah, that's the Chad. And the funny thing is I named him the Chad just randomly, and found out later there's another TikTok influencer who does a whole bunch of different like characters, and one of hers is a person called the Chad, and I
Oh, wow.
completely coincidental.
That's
But
funny.
it's such a fitting name for him.
This does not bode well for Chads in the world.
Yeah, I was gonna say people who are named Chad are like, dude, we're not bad. I keep joking that I even created a thumbnail to have Chad hijack one of my live streams. And so I have coffee with Ghost Mule. His is going to be cheap beer with the Chad. I actually used duct tape images and duct taped his Polaroid over my own face.
Okay. I gotta be there for that live stream for sure.
Yeah, I have to come up with a little bit more. It's going to be so hard because I have such a hard time being that character, and there's going to have to be like a disclaimer at the bottom saying I don't actually believe anything I'm saying. I'm just trying to live up to his reputation, so to speak. So I'm sure a lot of my fellow YouTube creators, which are absolutely my favorite people to interact with in the whole YouTube thing. It's funny. I started it and I prepared myself very heavily for negative interactions because I just expected you throw this on the internet.
That's what I was afraid of too.
And what I wasn't prepared for was how supportive and welcoming that community was. And some of my absolute best friends, and yourself included, are people who I never physically met. And I think that's the coolest thing in the world. So I have several of them that have all said that they will happily join in when the Chad decides to go live. So
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
gonna stock up on PBR and rock the Oakleys out for an hour.
Yeah, man, I feel exactly the same way. Like when I was actually really hesitant to do the YouTube thing because I was just priming myself for all the negativity. And part of that I'm learning when I post shorts is when I tend to get the negative stuff because that's the people who are just like scrolling nonstop. And, God, I'd be angry too if I was just scrolling nonstop. But
what are you doing with your life?
right? But as far as like generally speaking, when you post a full length long form video, I was taken back by the positivity. I'm still taken aback by the positivity. Was not prepared for it whatsoever. And it's like I think about it on a regular basis because I'm like I hate to say it, but I'm somewhat jaded And so when I read a comment, if it's not quite absolutely positive, like, some people type something and they're in a hurry and it comes out kind of wrong, it's not how they intended it. And my inclination is to go towards the negative side because I just assume that everybody's an ass. I hate to say it.
I think there's a reason.
I mean, probably. But what I'm learning on YouTube in general is that the majority of those comments aren't intended to be that way. And so I've actually had to really catch myself in my responses to not just jump to the conclusion that it was a negative comment.
I think there's always going to be negative people in every group. And, generally speaking, I always try to, take that stance. I always tell you when people bully you in school, like there's something with that person that's causing them to
Right.
be. But the other thing I will say, though, is I think we're fortunate because the community that we have kind of immersed ourselves into in this medium is by and large one of the most accepting communities out there. Obviously I come across people in the store. I don't deal with it a lot because I am cisgender white male, middle
Right.
class. I don't receive a lot. However, I'm also a big guy. And so my weight struggle is the thing. And I still get people that'll be like, wow, you made it all the way up here. And I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
it's like, really? But I think generally you don't get too much of that. Obviously I think that we're making a lot of headway in becoming even more accepting. But generally I don't think it's necessarily meant out of malice. It's just more, I think, unknowing instead in a way. But by and large, everybody that I've encountered in the community is usually, pretty decent. The people that I have issues with are typically people who are not necessarily in the backpacking community. They're kind of
Right.
bystanders looking out and don't understand it as well. But that said, like I say, there are always going to be people out there that are going to be negative. And a lot of times I do think because the comments, especially, it's a typed medium. And I think
Yes.
there's a certain loss of inflection that comes
Yep.
from typed medium. And so it's really difficult. So I've taken the path, unless somebody is just an outright tool, I always try to kill it with kindness, and I'll invite them to, explain, why they felt that way. Or, I recently had somebody comment about a video I did on my unnecessary necessities, like items that I don't have to take that
Mm-hmm.
I want to take. And by that definition of that, these are items that are not necessary, but I like them. And somebody got on there and listed off all the reasons why I was dumb for carrying this and that. And so I got on there and I said, well, I said, the greatest thing about backpacking gear is there's so many different options for so many different people to be able to find the thing that works for them. And I would be really curious to see what it is, the system that you use to make it work. So I would invite you to make a video in this line. And of course, they don't usually respond.
Right.
But, it was one way of basically saying, like, you don't need to be that way. Like, I get that you do things differently. This is how I do it. And that's
Yeah.
what I video, and that's what I'll say in the comments.
What's cool about our community on YouTube is that, I mean, we can sit and watch each other's videos and everybody is different. And I learn from everybody else's videos,
Mm-hmm.
things that they take or ways that they pack that I had never even thought of. You're right. There are so many different ways to do it. And I think that's one reason why YouTube is such a cool place for us as
Mm-hmm.
creators and
Yeah,
backpackers.
yeah. There's so many different ways that you can take it and do things and see how people do things differently. There is like an interesting phenomenon in backpacking. I mentioned that I felt like gear is the great unifier of backpacking because it doesn't matter if you're hiking the PCT or if you're a weekend warrior, you still have to use gear. And so that brings everybody to the same table, so to speak. I don't know if it's a human nature to be competitive or not, but I oftentimes remind people like, hey, backpacking is not a competitive sport. It's only competitive with yourself. I think that's why with my Facebook group, I had to put an actual rule on there that said no gear shaming, because I just see so many people get like such like high horse, high soapbox moments with gear. And it's just like,
Yeah.
And my least favorite question at work is when people ask, well, what do you use? And I'm like, man, I use what works for me. And it sounds like such a cop out answer, but it's true. You
Yeah.
know, my system works for me. None of the guys that I even hike with or gals that I hike with have even remotely close to the systems. They're all different. Everybody has their own little, but it's hard. You want to give them the best recommendation you can, but at the same time, it's like you probably shouldn't do what I do.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that I never even thought of changing my gear setup until I started getting older and it started getting harder.
100%.
I mean, I would like seriously, I was the type of person who was like, why change what's working? Like I had the same gear for years, never was interested in what other people were using. You know, I'm not a window shopper. If I'm happy with what I've got, it's good. And then all of a sudden, like mid 40s hit and I'm struggling, you know? And so I'm actually looking for lighter gear. And like I've done more experimenting with gear in the last probably 2 or 3 years than I have in my entire life of backpacking.
Yeah, that's the same for me. Even after like when I first started working in the industry, I was so that old school dude who was like still using his whisper light. I'm like, but it's a great stove, man. And then, I was like, crap, this stuff is getting a lot harder to carry. And for me, the best thing was I met the guy that I call my hiking mentor. He's been in a lot of my videos. His name's Jay. His trail name's Phantom. I think everybody needs that one person in life to like knock them down a little bit because he's the most humble person on the planet. Like you would never know he is as much of a badass as he is by talking to him. So he hiked the Appalachian Trail, I think when he was 65. He started the day after he ran the Boston Marathon. He then turned around, hiked the entire Appalachian Trail, and then like 2 or 3 years later, he hiked the whole Pacific Crest Trail. And that's actually when I met him. I sold him the pack that he took on the PCT, and I spent the next 6 months terrified he was going to be pissed at me when he got done. But he ended up loving the pack, so and obviously we're still really great friends. And he's also
And
the guy
he's,
who got me into the watercoloring and stuff.
I
So
was just going to say he's an artist too, right?
yeah, so he's actually, it was funny because somebody made the comment about, how is he going to be able to teach you? And I'm like, well, he's an art teacher. He's a retired art teacher.
I'm planning to buy one of his kits. I want to take one on the trail this season. I think that's so cool.
He is awesome. But he's in his 70s and he's still getting out there and hiking. And we just last year did the Wind River Range together. And, so I realized like one, that he can still do it at that age and do it well. And then two, teach me your ways, Obi-Wan, because,
Right?
struggling a lot less than I am. And I'm not, even close to his age. And so more and more my kit started resembling what I would call a thru hiker's kit, even though I'm not a thru hiker, because a lot of it made sense. And so it definitely, I think, is important for us to be open to the idea of utilizing things differently and not get too set in our ways, and because there's definitely different camps out there. There's the traditionalists, there's the ultralighters, there's the GI Joes out there. Those guys, you see them coming and they've got all like the military surplus gear, and even the military guys are like, dude, that stuff's not good.
Yeah. I mean, when I got out of the army, I swore I would never carry heavy shit again. Sorry. I was like, no, I'm
Right?
done with this.
It's a fire service the same way. I think everything has to be at least 50 pounds and
Right.
be hot.
Right. It's
So
durable, but it's
but yeah, so I think you see a lot of people out there, and I have a coworker that gives me grief. He calls me the ultralighter, and I'm like, I'm not even close to being.
yeah.
I just want to be able to have fun and not feel like I'm gonna die on the way up to the. I have nothing to prove to anybody at this point. Like I'm 44 years old. I can't carry 50 pounds of gear anymore. It's just not happening.
Yep.
And yeah, I've got a chair. Why? Because I'm tired of sitting on the ground.
So what do you think has been the hardest thing for you since you started doing the YouTube channel? Is there something that's been particularly difficult for you as far as creating content?
For me, the hardest thing is the things that I really like to do, like trip videos and stuff, just don't get the views. And I had somebody actually tell me like the reason why gear videos get views over trip videos is because people are like, I don't want to watch somebody else have fun, but I can get excited over a piece of gear that I relate with. So for me, I think the hardest thing for me to do is to do the talking head videos,
Yeah.
which is where you're basically sitting there talking about a subject or an item. Every once in a while, I'll get a topic that I really enjoy, or I'll do something that I think is a throwaway that actually does really well. For instance, the uncomfortable comfort zone video.
Yeah.
I thought about that while walking to the grocery store, and I threw a bunch of B-roll in, and next thing I know, it's got almost 1,000 views, which is by far one of the most highest one that doesn't involve gear. But a gear, again, it's a necessary thing. It's a necessary evil, and but for me, it's definitely harder to motivate myself to do those kinds of videos.
Same.
One, again, I don't really enjoy watching myself over and over and over again. I think a lot of people think that people who make videos love to hear and see themselves, and most of them
Nope.
don't. I actually can't.
Not a chance.
Yeah, it's tough. When I first started, it was so horrible. I just was like, it's like fingernails on the chalkboard, But again, I've gotten pretty good at doing them. The other thing that I think it's harder for me is kind of creating the brand, so to speak, if you will. Again, a necessary kind of evil thing. I was fortunate because I had a friend of mine make my logos for me that I work with. She does graphic design, but it's also things like, kind of keeping that continuity of things around. Like thumbnails and stuff like that. Like, I'm not a big fan of making
Not
thumbnails,
either.
but it's such an integral part of the process. In fact, I was finishing up the thumbnail for my next video before this happened, and again, I've gotten good at it, but it's not what I say would be the thing that keeps me doing it.
I
But there
think
are
my
parts of the
problem
process.
with the thumbnails and the titles, like what I can't bring myself to do is the clickbait titles.
Yeah,
Those are like that's part of the game, to get views and stuff.
yeah, I've done some, but probably the most clickbaity one I did was when I said that I shot myself with bear spray, and this is what I learned.
I think you must be getting a burst of views on that because it showed up on my homepage.
I haven't even looked. I know that I did the classic short where I said, "This is the moment he knew he effed up," and
Oh yeah, that's the one I saw.
yeah, all my friends were like, "Dude, you can't show that," and I'm like, I mean, it happened. I learned from it.
And the bottom line is like, how many of us is really going to stop and see which direction the wind is blowing before you spray the bear that's 10 feet away from you?
Yeah. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to do a lot of solo stuff in grizzly country anymore because I couldn't see for 20 minutes. You're supposed to spray the bear spray and then leave. I wouldn't have been able to do that part if I was by myself. We were in a parking lot. Eventually
Yeah,
it goes away, but if it goes away for me, it's also gone away for the bear, and he's now even
right.
more angry. So it was literally an eye-opening experience, or an eye-closing experience. I don't recommend it, but take my word for it. And I think that's also why I wanted to show it, because a little bit of suffering and a little bit of bruised ego, people can learn from those things.
Absolutely.
And so, you can take it on a cheek. It wasn't my most shining moment in life, and I get a lot of grief over it still from all my friends.
But I
Um,
guarantee you there are some people out there who stopped and actually thought about what they would do in that situation now. You know,
yeah, I think we take for granted, that this is how it's going to go, and it very rarely goes that way because the
yeah.
bear is not going to stop and wait for you to go. Oh, winds out
Right.
of the east. Can we pull out this windsock here? And the funny thing is that everybody gave me so much credit. Didn't you check the wind? We checked the wind 10 times. If you watch the video, it's going perfectly, and then all of a sudden, for 1 second, it goes whoop, and then it
Yeah.
goes back to it. And I
Yeah.
was like, seriously.
Yeah. I kind of chuckle. I think Z-Pac's duplex does this. Like you're supposed to set the tent up with the main doors into the wind or whatever. I'm like, are you kidding me? The wind changes direction every 5 seconds in the mountains.
Whoever came up with that, like,
I know.
maybe that works when you're in coastal Florida where they're based out of, because the wind always comes in a same direction unless a hurricane hits.
Right.
Yeah, up here in the mountains, that's just not a thing.
No.
You're gonna get it from all sides, and God help you if you have the wrong pitch.
Right.
But yeah, like, I think all of it has been a lot of fun, and it's definitely a labor of love. I don't make any money off of this. I actually spend money to do it. I have my subscription to Epidemic Sounds and stuff like that, and of course there's gear and stuff, and the whole controversy about whether or not people were going to monetize because of the National Park Service and all that.
Yeah.
And to me, it wasn't even an issue because I was like, well, if it comes down to being able to film and being monetized, I'm just not going to monetize. If I have to, I can do a Patreon or something. But
Yeah.
I started out to have a way to express myself artistically. And that's what's fun for me. And I'm going to continue to do the fun. And if other people continue along on it, I'm just even more blessed by that, because I'm still 500 hours short of being able to monetize. For me, like you said, it was not a drive. I enjoy my job. I have no intentions of ending it, and I have no delusions of grandeur that I'm going to be the next, what's his name? Dan Becker. More power to him. He got a thing and it's working for him. I'm going to do what makes me happy and what makes me have fun, and everything else is just additional.
As far as the gear review stuff goes, like that's not my favorite thing to do. Although recently I've kind of been able to think about it a little differently just because I've had so many comments thanking me for information. And that has really been kind of a, I don't know, a motivator to do the gear stuff because I feel like I'm actually helping people. Before it was just like, I'm just like promoting a capitalist society. This isn't really what I want to be doing. But if it's actually helping people, then that makes me feel better. Ghost Mule has become a ghost. There he is. Welcome
Sorry.
back.
Thanks. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Living up to that trail name.
Yeah. So speaking of that, how did you get your trail name?
This is one of my absolute favorite stories, and it's the reason why I do use it. So, and it's 100% true, despite what Jay will tell you. I was not hallucinating either. Uh, but yeah, so we were in the Bighorn Mountains. We were on the second day of a 7-day trip, and we had just started hiking that morning, and we were kind of coming down a little hill. And at the bottom of the hill, I saw very distinctly a pack animal, a mule, donkey, whatever, and it had canvas bags on its side with brass fittings and leather straps. I mean, I very distinctly saw this, to the point where I made the comment to them behind me. I said, "Oh, we got some pack animals coming up," and they both are like, "What?" And so we get down there, and we don't pass any animal. Nothing is there. There's no people around. There's no nothing around. It's just the three of us. There's no hoof prints in the sand. There's nothing. I saw a spectral pack animal, I guess, but I distinctly saw a, a, a mule with saddlebags and everything else, and it never was there. Those guys accused me of everything from being dehydrated to taking mushrooms and everything else. I was like, man, I'm peeing clear, and I have not taken anything other than what's in a mountain house. So unless they're starting to season those things with hallucinogenics, I don't know, man.
Spice him up a bit.
Yeah. So, and then the funny thing is that night, Connor, the other guy on the trip, also got his trail name, and so we were sitting around the campfire, and it was a weird day. Our maps ended up being wrong, and we knew where we were, but we weren't where we wanted to be, and we didn't know if we were going to get to where we wanted to be, and everything worked out fine. But we ended up finding a campsite, and we were just done. And so we're sitting around, and we're just kind of joking around, and all of a sudden Connor just goes, oh, and he jumps up, and there is hot food all over his pants. The bag of food he had made, the zipper portion had actually separated from the side of the bag. It was still closed, but the bag popped open, and he was kneading it, and
Oh
it's
my
like
God.
Mount Vesuvius all over him. And and so he got hot pants. In typical Jay fashion, he didn't say anything that day. He waited until we were all getting ready to go for the morning, and he's sitting there, and we're all like half asleep, and he's all stoic and mentor like, and he's like, "I have decided to bestow upon you both trail names." Connor and I both just like, "Oh, this should be fun."
And a bright light down from the heavens.
Yeah, chorus of angels in the background. And so I kind of wish I had filmed it, but I was still half asleep, and I talked about it later. But so Connor and I got our trail names on the same day, so Hot Pants and Ghost Mule.
So Jay is Phantom, right? How did he get his?
So Phantom is his second trail name. His trail name on the Appalachian Trail was Cairn, and I don't know how he got that one, but Phantom he got because he is a very quiet individual. He's very soft spoken and stuff, and he started the PCT by himself. He was a solo hiker, but he definitely hung out with some groups of people from time to time. And he would be hiking, and they would be convinced that he was in front of them or behind them, and then all of a sudden he would just show up. He just had this tendency to show up at camp and like, we thought we passed you and everything. And so, yeah, he got called Phantom, which of course is a really cool. Whereas Connor and I got more comical trail names.
And maybe
it got me on a podcast. Like the whole reason I was ever on, it's called the Hiker Trash Radio now. It used to be called the John freaking Muir Pod. I followed along and he saw my handle on Instagram and I commented on something he posted and he's like, you gotta tell me the story behind your trail name, because he's big into trail names on the show. And I told him, and he's like, yeah, you're going to have to be a guest. And I'm like, but he's like got people like Jeff Garmeyer and stuff on there on a regular basis. I'm like, I haven't done squat, but yet here I am. I'm on the same podcast as all of them, but only because
that's pretty cool.
A weird trail name, but
that's still pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So it's definitely stuck in, you know, I don't see myself ever having a different trail name because it's got a great story from a great person. And
yeah,
it's somewhat fitting. I listen to ghost podcasts and stuff when I'm out there. So I'm a little bit of a woo-woo kid.
Yeah, I have some ghost stories that I want to tell on my Stories from Wild Places thing. My problem is I'm not a very good oral storyteller. So it's like I've had that animation that my brother made. I've had it literally for probably a year. And it's all been in the back of my mind, but that's another one of those things where, you know, my inner Chad is like, you suck at storytelling. This is not something you should do.
Most people who think they are sucky at storytelling are actually really good at it.
I suck. And especially when nobody else is in the room to actually like be talking to. It's so bizarre to do these YouTube videos and nobody's here. It's like, I don't know, it's hard to get into it.
Well, I want to do another. So my buddies and I got around at Jay's backyard and we told some ghost stories and stuff, and it was fun. But I wanted to do one where it was just creators, and so my little inner circle of hiking creators, I want to say, hey, if you guys have a ghost story, I want to do a video. So yeah, if you want to get in on that, we'll figure that out. But I want to do that.
Oh, yeah. So, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'd be totally into that.
Right on.
I'll have you on my Stories from Wild Places too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got some ghost stories too. I even did ghost hunting when I was in college. I live up to my name, very ironically.
That's pretty cool. Did Jay know about that when he named you?
Nope. He already made fun of me enough for having a Bigfoot sticker on my pack. I wasn't going to tell him that. This last trip we were on, we were camped at a dispersed campsite just along the road there because our whole plan went south, and you can see it in the video. But so we're just like parked there, and it was like the next morning I was half asleep, and all of a sudden I hear right outside my tent. I'm thinking, well, there's it. This is how I die, as a grizzly. And then all of a sudden, a few minutes later, here. Buddy's little yappy dog had gotten out of their camp and was outside and growling outside of my tent. I'm like a child. The trip that we were on, I kept hearing something running around outside, and finally I realized it had hooves, and so I went back to sleep. And the next morning, you know, I'm looking out and I saw this family of 4 mountain goats, and they came right into the camp and they were watching me, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And this is before I realized that they really like to drink human urine.
Yep.
And I didn't know this, and so I go off into the bushes and I'm urinating, and it was like a scene out of Jurassic Park. This goat comes out of the bush 4 feet away from me, and it starts licking as I'm depositing, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm in the middle of the backcountry and I'm peeing on a goat's head.
Oh my god. Oh geez. I just got this visual of this goat peeking out through the bush.
The velociraptor ahead, and nobody's going to believe me this actually happened.
That's hilarious. Of course, if you have 2 dogs like I do, then you have 2 dogs that go with you. And we have what we call synchronized peeing in the mornings, you know, because I'm the type of dog guardian that if I can't be fully paying attention to them, then they have to be leashed to me. And so obviously, if I'm doing my business, I can't be making sure they're not wreaking havoc somewhere. So they're leashed to me. And we've gotten so used to this now that like every morning when I go out to pee, we all 3 pee at the same time.
Oh, it's time to pee. Let's go. The family that pees together stays together. That's awesome.
Yeah, sometimes I just look around and I crack myself up because it's like, is this real life?
There's so many moments where I feel like I'm stuck on some sort of sitcom and just didn't get the memo. Like, you look around and like, are there cameras?
So I always ask people, what do you think is the most important thing to you about spending time outside? Like, what does it mean to you?
For me, it's healing. So for me, the part that I didn't really go into much on this one is a lot of my activities revolved around my mental trauma from working in the fire service, which is something I've never shied away from. I've dealt with PTSD and depression and all that from that quite a bit. And at first, when I came out of that, of course, you've got all this stuff going going on up there, and I'm relatively healthy now. It's always a work in progress, but definitely come a long way in getting through a lot of that. And a big part of that was going into the woods allowed me to quiet it for a long enough period of time that I could, work towards getting through that. And so, for me, like I say, it was integral to that, and continues to be integral to maintaining more of a balance in my mental and physical health for that purpose of it. So for me, a big part of it is just, it's where I feel the most centered. It's where I feel, the most calm. It allows me to get away from all of the craziness, because even though I have pretty much molded a pretty good life, that is relatively now free of drama and trauma and all that, it's still, any kind of life can get overwhelming at times, and so it just allows me to pull away from a world that seems to always be making noise and kind of find that quiet, safe place to kind of decompress. And even though I don't do a lot of stuff alone, I've got a really great tribe of people that I do go with that are a part of that. So you don't have to be by yourself. You don't have to immerse yourself in the woods alone in order to get it. But yeah, for me, it's just about, maintaining my mental health.
All right. Well, let's put an official end to this, shall we?
Awesome. It's been fun though. I've really enjoyed it.
This has been fun. Thanks for chatting with me, and hopefully we'll do this again. I'll have you on stories from wild places, and maybe we can do some ghost stories as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I look forward to doing some more stuff, and I think we could. I've got a few other ideas. I know we talked about possibly looking into doing a little book club thing. We got to figure that out. I think it's a lot of fun. Like I said, I think these are becoming more the things people will look for. So the podcasts and the vidcasts and stuff are going to be more, I think, integral. So anything I can help, I'm more than happy to.
Awesome. Look forward to your next video. I'll put a link to your channel.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.